Meeting to order. Before I start with the agenda, I do have to leave here at 8:20, so forgive me, but I have to go get PT on my shoulder. So the first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from July 13th. Do we have any comments, changes? No? Okay. Do I have a motion to pass the minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I can't vote because I wasn't here. Yeah.
Update from First Selectman's Office, Mr. Cook.
Well, it will be brief. Well, let me start with something positive, and actually. Yeah, isn't that a great idea?
Yeah.
We'll put Ms. Nielsen in the spotlight here as somebody who's been working pretty hard with launching one of our first shared parking agreements for the downtown. And I think it was probably 2 meetings ago where we discussed the study that was done, which essentially a parking study that concluded that there are a lot of parking spaces actually around, that they very rarely are at capacity, and that we can do an awful lot between signage and some of these shared parking agreements to make things work for current businesses and the residents using them. So the first, we don't have the agreement in hand yet, but Sarah's been working very closely with town staff and the Fiddler's Green folks to create a parking agreement for the parking behind Eno and at Fiddler's Green and some of the parking along the road there. We have, I think we're very close to having a final memorandum on that. We're expecting the concept to be presented to the Board of Selectmen on Monday night. And if everything goes well, council will prepare an actual contract for this, and we'll have a model that can be used, I think, throughout the downtown and elsewhere.
This has nothing to do with the application that they came in front of zoning for regarding.
Completely separate.
Completely separate, okay.
So all the property owners are going to agree basically to this understanding? Is that how it works?
In this case, well, that's the theory, Dave. We're talking about just two right now. We're just talking about the spaces at Eno and the Fiddler's Green complex. And you know, that's been a challenge over time. But in reality, the shared use is quite mutually beneficial. The seniors tend to be there in the morning. No one's at restaurants usually, or not large numbers there, and first thing in the morning. And the number of folks using Eno is usually pretty well diminished after about 3:30, which is when things really start to pick up for Fiddler's Green. So they're arranging, they're allowing shared use for most of that time.
I'm sorry, I did misspeak. The shared parking agreement was precipitated by Fiddler's Green application before zoning.
Okay.
It's going to be separate, but as part of the shared parking, it's actually a shared parking and use agreement, so it will cover not only parking, which as Tom mentioned, their peak times don't compete with each other. They actually complement each other, which is fantastic. It'll codify some of the relationships that have existed for more than a decade. For example, when Fiddler's Green came in for their site plan more than 10 years ago, the dumpsters were located on town property, but it was never brought to the Board of Selectmen because they are the only ones who can approve policy. In return, Fiddler's Green also provided an easement on Wilcox Street to the town for the sidewalk. So we're going to codify a lot of the relationships that have been in agreement, you know, but we're going to do it in a fashion that protects everybody. They're going to deal with signage issues, maintenance issues. It benefits both the town of Simsbury and the users and Fiddler's Green and the patrons. So nobody loses. It's actually everybody wins.
It just sounds like you're just finalizing a verbal agreement that's been in place for years.
In many respects, that's correct.
Refining it a little bit, absolutely.
Right, yeah. But just making it formal and everybody on the same page.
And then we have a few more details we want to double check before I can.
But it'll be seamless for the customers, right? They'll keep doing what they're always doing.
That's exactly right. There was for years we would have an annual request from Fiddlers to use the Eno parking for the PAC events, and rather than go through that song and dance, as to your point, Maureen, this is great. It's going to actually get it all down on one piece of paper, and And does,
Yeah, so it's not just parking, it's actually a comprehensive use agreement.
Right.
But I just want to applaud the town because after the parking study that Main Street and the town of Simsbury did with Desmond and Associates, and we presented to the Board of Selectmen, this will be the first agreement. The town is gonna be the role model for, as we move forward, we're not forcing anyone to do shared parking agreements, Dave, so I wanna be, clear about that, but we
Yeah.
will be, for example, there's already a shared parking agreement that's verbally in place between Bank of America and Fiddler's Green. For anyone that goes to McLadden's or anything, you notice that on the weekends, a lot of people park through the drive-in and all of that. So what it does, it'll allow those things, but it'll also protect each property owner. Say there's a big game in Bank of America, during business hours. Bank of America now knows they can call someone and say, listen, I need you to get those cars out of here, we're in business, they make one phone call and it's taken care of. So it deals with some liability issues, should
Right.
there be a slip and fall. So it provides greater protections for both parties that are just kind of operating on good faith right now.
and clarity.
Yeah.
So the town then, in that little example you gave, the town then would send the enforcement officer down and ask people to move, is that how it would work?
No, it will depend on what the infraction is, how it's reported, and whether or not the chief of police feels that it's sensitive enough, but with the agreements, again, shared parking agreements are normally meant to be worked out by the two private parties, so it would be worked out by, for example, Bank of America and Fiddler's Green instead. The town will stay
So
out.
all these property owners will sign on this contract or something, right?
They will have the option of signing with adjacent property owners.
And they'll be quite specific to
Yes.
each arrangement.
The only reason the town is involved in this one is because the two sites in question, one's town property, one's private property.
Right.
But the town won't expect to be involved in future
That's
shared parking agreements.
Is it just basically used as a model?
Exactly, that's exactly it. So
We want to
it's-
set the standard, we want to show people that it works,
Right,
and
and give
the
them a
town
working
is-
draft, yeah. So the only other thing, just a very quick update on the Deepwater Wind petition. It's, the town was granted party status. This is probably old news to a lot of you. To get to the update as quickly as I can, the Board of Selectmen got back some very good reports from the different boards and commissions, which has allowed it to prepare some very, some in-depth interrogatories and is starting to formulate potential asks as they go into the process. One of the things that's happened is that the DEEP is involved, and they are asking for a very high level of review. There's a statute passed, Senate Bill 943, which would create the presumption that an array like this on land on agricultural land like the land involved here would go with a presumption that they are environmentally incompatible. So what that would do is put a fairly high standard on deepwater wind to show that this is an appropriate use for the property. So that's what's happening there. There's the public hearing that is scheduled for September 12th at Eno Memorial Hall. And we're working hard to make sure that all the right questions are asked. The Board of Selectmen has not taken a position on this yet. I think as the reports from the different boards and commissions have come in, they're probably in a position to start to refine what it is they want to try to accomplish themselves in the process. So, yeah, Tom.
You did forward to this commission the letter from a citizen, a very long letter, written by Diane Tracy?
Yes.
Diane Tracy. And there was a very important comment in that document, and I'd like to read it. This is in the penultimate paragraph of this document. She says, "Are we ready to surrender for an entire generation some of the last buildable residential land Is our town going to flatline with the majority of homes 50-plus years old? Do we really want to give up on light industrial land that could bring jobs to our community? As far as I'm, at least as a member of this commission, that is the most important thing that this citizen has written. And it really got my attention because we were unable to, and did not, have never put together a real review of the inventory of developable land, at least as far as I know, on this commission. And when I read this, it really got my attention because one of the things we put in our report to the first select woman was a concern about whether or not that was the highest and best use of the land. And Mr. Rabbit did say, well, you know, you can say that all you want, but that's an argument you won't win. But to me, this underscores the absolute need for a strategic plan for economic development in this community, because we haven't even addressed that question. Many of us are sitting here at this table. I mean, maybe some of us know what the inventory of buildable land is. I sure don't. The
last time we had a overview of that was probably 2 years ago, I would say, that we had a list, an Excel spreadsheet, I believe it was, of available properties and what the uses were.
We may have had that list, and that needs to be addressed in a strategic plan, but it also probably should have been referenced in our response to the first selectman. So I would simply like to suggest that we have another discussion on this subject, perhaps with our chairperson.
Well, if you're going to have a
recusing himself.
discussion about it, I need to recuse myself.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah.
Thank you for completing my sentence.
Sorry.
Who's the letter from?
The letter was
From Diane
circulated.
Tracy, who's in the butter.
She's in the butter, that was my question.
Yeah, it was forwarded to all of us.
Are we having a discussion about this?
We are not.
I would just observe, Tom, that
Just to finish what I was going to suggest, thank you, Tom. I was only going to suggest that perhaps we should have another discussion on this subject to see if we want to make any other statements to the town about this project having to do with inventory of buildable land. This is a point that we should not ignore as a commission.
To your point, I think it would be helpful to see it kind of like in map form, colored parcels, because a list of, kind of like a list of things, like I've got lousy spatial, I don't know where stuff is, I'm not good like that. So if there's like a map of the town and you've got, okay, here's green spots that are buildable or color coded by what zone or that sort of thing, that would be super helpful to the extent we're going to have a conversation on that. And I think it would be helpful for kind of the planning process.
It definitely would be helpful, and the other thing would be helpful would be to have an estimate of the potential tax revenue associated with each one of those plots, including the ones in question. I am a little confused about the number that was given to us at our last meeting on what this was going to bring in terms of revenue to the town, because I've seen numbers elsewhere that don't agree.
the only numbers that I'm paying attention to were created by our assessor in connection with our planner. And I think that was a document that I forwarded to all of you.
I see.
To be very clear about this, that number is based on the assessors, how the assessor would value the personal property if the estimates provided by Deepwater Wind are accurate. All this really depends on what they finally build, and what happens with the value of the property depending on the use. And the guy who determines that is David Gardner.
Well, and I think to Tom's point, doing an inventory of properties in town that are available, for David to do an assessment about what the potential tax revenue would be very difficult, not knowing
I think that's
what would go in that
Right.
space, because depending if it's commercial, light industrial, residential, they're all taxed differently, because equipment is taxed differently.
Exactly. So that part is a challenge. The other observation is that I think the Planning Commission did report back that in its view, this proposed use was inconsistent with the plan of conservation and development. which, to the extent there are strategic plans out there, was the strategic plan for use of land in this town up till now. So.
And the zoning commission had a special meeting the other evening,
That's
which is
correct.
not,
And they concluded that if this were not a Connecticut Siting Council project, the project would not conform with the zoning code here. So this, this is the kind of data that we've accumulated, and it's very helpful. A lot of what was provided included questions about, well, for example, there remain questions about the environmental impact of this on the land. Remain a lot of questions about the current state of that property. You know, the Griffin Land property that, oh come on, what was the big project?
Meadowwood.
Meadowwood, thank you. There were a lot of issues, environmental issues that were found when this property was studied for potential residential use. We really need to know more about what's going on with the soils there before we really can come to a conclusion ourselves as to what the best possible use is, the highest use is. So I think right, so far the town's primary goal has been to make sure that the hard and detailed questions are asked. We've retained an engineer to help with the environmental side. I don't think a formal arrangement has been made yet with a landscape design expert, but we've had several meetings with residents on buffering. And I know Chris has been at a number of those, but that's to make sure that we have the town representatives have a good understanding of, if this does move forward, how do we best represent residents in terms of what they see out of their windows.
Well, just taking this a little bit further, I wasn't aware of that zoning conclusion.
it just happened this week.
Thank you for sharing it. I was aware of the position the Planning Commission took. And having reread our submission, which was very well written and very well done, and it did, I think, faithfully reflect the views that were expressed here at our meeting last month, and probably other views that were given to Mr. Moore after that meeting. But the fact is, this Economic Development Commission has not taken a position on this project. And I believe, at the very least, we should either decide to take a position or take no position. We haven't made that decision. We just sort of fell into what we did. But we didn't debate whether this commission should or should not take a position on that project, so we didn't. And that's a debate I think we have an obligation to have. And if we do decide to take a position on this project, we should have a special meeting on it of some kind and take a position. Do we, as an Economic Development Commission, do we support this project or not? I think if we don't do that, then we are derelict in our duty. And so I would ask my fellow members on the commission for any views on that as a procedural matter.
Well, I don't know if I need to leave or.
I don't think you do, because this is a procedural matter at
Yeah.
the moment.
So I'm
I would just
not gonna
abstain,
comment.
Chris,
I'm
except I think
abstaining
that's
from any
fine.
comments.
Right. But if rather than a formal vote here, if the balance of the members are interested in scheduling a special meeting, then I will reach out to the vice chair and try to arrange a special meeting for you all to consider the position on the Deepwater Wind project.
I would support that idea for one person.
Okay, well, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I support, it gets to be a little bit tricky to the extent that, well, we're voting on the proposed plan, and so for example, I don't know if it was half as big as what they're talking about, would that be acceptable? Like, maybe it would, so if there was, so I don't know what, is it?
I don't know if I can say anything.
If I were you, Chris, I think
I'm
at
just
this
gonna
point-
try, yeah.
No. Pardon me.
So is it the project in its current form, or is it putting any solar project of any size there?
I would observe that because, for the very reason that we don't know what it's ultimately going to be, and it is a moving target, but still there's a principle involved from an economic development standpoint.
Right.
And the principle involved is, do we support this type of economic development activity in this community and in that location? Forget about the details.
Well, I mean, I suppose the details matter. For example, let's suppose it's half as big and the power goes to Simsbury and we get some off-the-grid benefit, because it goes to Hot Meadow Street. Well, that's a completely different story than.
To the extent that, Jay, I mean, there is already a power purchase agreement in place with a Massachusetts company for this, so there are.
But so for this particular one, I understand we don't get that. So I'm just trying to better understand what we would be voting on. If we would be voting on this project as we currently understand it, or would we be voting on any project that has to do with any solar arrays anywhere on that property?
I think it would be up to us to make that decision as a commission.
If we were voting on this project as it's presented, then yeah, that's.
The Clean Energy Task Force, for example, said, we think that solar power here is great. And that said, we think this project is too large and ought to be scaled back so that it doesn't have a negative impact on the abutters. And there are sections that we think ought to be taken out. So committees have taken a look at it. I don't think any of the boards or commissions have come out with a thumbs up or down, except to the extent that the decision is this compatible with the plan of conservation development? Is this compatible with our zoning regulations? Those are pretty, those were straightforward questions. But conservation, for example, said, well, we need to know a lot more about what's going on with the soils and what goes on with construction and erosion before we know. But if in fact this doesn't have a significant negative impact, there may be some value here. So that's the kind of input we've gotten. It hasn't been sort of yay or nay.
Yes.
Maybe what we could do is a procedural matter rather than a special meeting. And again, our chairwoman would have to recuse herself, but I could envision, given the importance of this project, that's going to be with us for a very long time, that we could say we have one agenda item in our next meeting, and that's this project. We could do it that way at our September.
Yeah.
Not a comment about the project, however, our next meeting is not scheduled until after the public hearing, I believe,
September 12th is the public hearing. When
which is
would
a
it be?
Tuesday, and our meeting is that week on a Thursday.
That's because are we the second Thursday?
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's correct.
So, if you were to have a meeting about this and wanted to have input that was provided to the Board of Selectmen, it would have to happen before that at a special meeting, because the public hearing is the 12th, and the Board of Selectmen asked for input by the 31st of July. So, that's no comment about the project, it's just.
Yes.
a
It's a
date.
procedural comment.
Procedural comment, okay, I just wanted to make everybody aware of that.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
May I ask Tom a couple of questions?
I can't, but go ahead.
There's a big sign down on Ensign Bickford property, Donald Nobel property, talking about an environmental impact study of something that's going on down there. Do you know anything about that?
I do not.
Are you aware of the sign?
I haven't seen it actually, no. I'll have
That's
to drive by
right,
and.
it's been there for a couple of weeks. It's right on Route 10.
I
Zoning hasn't picked it up yet?
like the way you think first.
Well,
She's tough. She's on vacation.
Oh,
So she hasn't There you seen the go. sign.
Don't tell him that.
well, the sign is
She's
a
coming
big
back
sign, okay?
All right.
And
Might
the
not
only
meet the
thing I
requirements.
know, the only thing I know about it is that allegedly, and I'm not sure of this, when there's an environmental impact study done on a piece of property, by some group, they have to post some kind of a sign up there. And I don't know what they're studying down there, but that whole site, I don't know if it's the whole site that's under consideration, or just the main office building, or what it is. But it's, that's a pretty big plant down there, and we ought to know what's going on, I would think.
Well, yeah, I think that's tangential really to at least the agenda, what we're speaking about now. So if we could just
Oh,
close.
we're off your subject, we're on another subject.
I don't think we are because we
Well,
haven't.
I think we were, because I just raised the subject. So
Well,
don't try to tie yours in with my subject.
just going back to what we were talking about, what was on the table, at least was a discussion about the possibility of dedicating a meeting of this commission to the Deepwater project. We haven't finished that discussion because we haven't decided whether or not to do that.
What's that got to do with what I'm talking about?
Well, and Tom needs to finish what.
Just wanted to finish that one before we moved
Needs
into
closure on that
what
conversation
you're, I
We
just
have
wanted.
23 minutes.
Yeah.
before I leave.
So
we
it-
haven't discussed
One of the most important
the
things.
draft of the report that we were supposed to do 2 meetings ago.
I'll give you 30 minutes. I'll race.
Okay, so,
Just ask the
I don't
police
know,
officers not to follow.
Madam Chairwoman, we have to resolve this, do we or don't we have a special meeting prior to the public hearing?
I have
to
a
discuss this?
procedural question. If I recuse myself and Dave was not present at the last meeting, we don't have a quorum because we only have 3 members of the board, the commission, who were here at the last meeting, who can Dave vote on this or not?
Yeah, you don't
If there's
have
a
to-
motion?
You don't have to vote to set a special meeting.
We don't.
Right, so.
It can just be a request.
Right, exactly.
I just wanted a procedural clarification.
So that's, I mean, if, for example, you all wanted to meet on the 7th instead of the 14th, a week early, that's something we could probably take a look at.
Well,
If
well,
they meet on the 7th regarding this subject,
Right.
is that time enough to provide the Board of Selectmen an opinion?
So the first goal was to have information for the preparation of interrogatories. Those will be drafted, have been drafted and are under review by our council now. There is a motion pending for
An
an
extension for
extension
the public
of
hearing?
the process. One of two things is likely to happen with that. Either the extension will be granted and there will not be a public hearing on September 12th, it'll be
It will
later.
be pushed out.
Or alternatively, the commission may very well, or the council may very well continue the public hearing so that there's a second public hearing date, which would provide time. How the EDC's position is incorporated into the process will really depend on what happens with these motions to continue at this point.
So we would have to make a motion to move our meeting, if we want to move the regular meeting to the 7th, but we wouldn't have to make a motion to have a special meeting.
It's very rare that we have, for example, meetings are canceled without
A vote.
a vote. Meetings
Okay.
are established without a vote, so this is something.
So if you're
that-
comfortable having a meeting on the 7th, that you think that's time enough for the members of the commission to get a
We can-
letter to the Board of
Right,
Selectmen?
we can always do a supplemental response, including the letter.
I won't be there, but that's fine.
Your way.
Yeah, I'm away.
I'm away as well.
Well, then that's a problem. We might not have a quorum, because if I recuse myself, that might be an issue.
So,
These
So
are-
I would suggest that if you want to do something, it would have to be in the form of a special meeting late August, sometime in August.
or you could just use the next meeting for part of, to have some
On the
discussion.
14th.
On the 14th, and then.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
All right.
we'll keep the regular meeting.
Okay, next, I'm sorry,
Do we want to
David.
get to the agenda items first?
Yes. Are you done, Mr. Cook? You said you had bad news.
Yes, ma'am.
You had bad news. You said,
No,
you said, started out by saying I was gonna get good news, so.
It's been a relatively quiet
Okay.
time. This is summer, but
No,
it was good to have some of the
Okay.
parking stuff move forward, so I'm done.
Okay.
Is there anything new on the state and the budget of the town that we should know about?
The answer is no. It is a mess, and continues to be a mess, but
Of Connecticut. So the next agenda item is the review of the NEDC draft report that Tom has thoughtfully pulled together all of our thoughts over many meetings into a document that we've had plenty of time to review. Tom, I want to thank you for your hard work on all of this.
Much obliged.
And So I would like to open it up for discussion, questions, comments. I've read through it. I didn't really see anything substantial that was different from anything that we've discussed at our previous meetings or a compilation of our minutes, but
The only real change in this draft from what you saw before was to incorporate the comments and suggestions were made at 2 meetings ago.
Right.
And they have been incorporated.
does anybody have any questions, discussion items on this?
I think the only thing that I had was with respect, I sent an email. Actually, I guess it didn't really go to the group, did it? It went to Tom and to you.
I didn't get it. Well, I may have gotten it.
It was
but-
back in July.
It was back in July.
So I had some, yeah, so I had some comments, kind of with respect to the targeted sectors, that I sent in an email.
What section of the
This is, so
draft
it's
report?
section D,
Okay,
number 4.
right.
And, I guess the thrust was that, I didn't necessarily have the same view as to the targeted sectors. And, I proposed some others, and then toward the end of the email, I said, well, gee, the first paragraph says we weren't asked to provide suggestions on strategies. So, it's important that we continue to kind of articulate our views. But if I'm saying, hey, these are the targeted things, and this is what I think, everyone probably has their own view on that, and it might be too difficult to get consensus on what the targeted industries ought to be.
Well, and
So
I think, just
perhaps
to interject, I think we were echoing what the Fairweather report was saying, plus adding in senior facilities, which are also, there's some already approved on the books. This study is 4+ years old. Things change, as we know, and this probably is going to be a moving target.
Yeah. So I guess my view is I would support it if we took out 4 from section D, because I don't agree with those targeted sectors. I would not vote for. I would not support any document that has retail as a strategy, because it isn't, and we could debate that as long as you would like. But
Well, brick and mortar is,
Well, to be responsive to Jay's comment, I've identified a word in here that should be changed, and the word is would. Because in the second line of that paragraph, that should be changed to could or might. Simply to recognize that there has been some work done and thinking done on targeted sectors, but this report should not endorse those target sectors. I agree with Jay's comment completely. But I think it would be responsible for us to at least suggest some directions that might be discussed in future. And so I would propose to change that word, might include the following suggested by Fairweather, and other target sectors that might be suggested in the future.
then,
Or I should say more
to me, there's
suggested
no
than
point in
not limited to.
specifying.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're saying, well, it could include this, that's the same thing as saying it should include. Because once you put something in writing and saying, okay, this is part of their plan, they're not going to parse it in terms of, oh, well, it only says maybe. It doesn't say, I mean, if it's there, that's what it appears to be our recommendation. So if we want to take out number 4, I would support the document. If we want to leave it in, I'll vote against it. So that's just,
could it be accomplished by saying that we would focus on target sectors that are consistent with the strategic plan of development that is done between the Board of Selectmen and the new NEDC? Because that is an agenda item that we're looking to have input on a strategic plan for the town moving forward for economic development, and we don't know what that's gonna be. We've got a new federal government coming, we've got new players in place.
Could you say
potentially in
those words
December.
again, please? What you just said?
I gotta remember that.
Yeah, it's done well.
Well, what I wrote down was.
Focus on target sectors consistent with the strategic economic plan of development as developed by the NEDC with the Board of Selectmen. That was kind of what I said. I think.
I get the point. Well, that would be responsive to.
I'm just saying that leaves it open-ended.
Yeah, and rather than
So
show
as we
these.
study
Specific,
things
yeah.
moving in the forward, so we get a inventory list
I think that's an excellent-
of parcels, and then we
Are you
know
okay
what
with
those
that?
uses can be, and
Yeah,
then
'cause it's
as,
not anything, I mean,
You're
it's,
not
so it's
limiting- you're not
consistent with a
limiting.
plan that hasn't been created.
Okay, I'm
Right.
gonna take it as
Right.
take it as
well, but the
read.
plan is something that we're hoping to create with the Board of Selectmen, in using that inventory list that we just discussed. We can identify
Yeah.
types of businesses that we'd like to attract to town based on the parcels that are available, because we can't say we want to attract something and not have anything for them to build on.
Okay,
Because
so
it's not consistent with our zoning regs.
I'm gonna take it then as read that we will eliminate subsections A, B, C, and D, and we will adopt language that is similar to the language that Kristen had just suggested.
Do I have a motion to
Focus
change?
focus on target sectors, I will change that whole paragraph to say, focus on target sectors suggested by a strategic plan, and then a few more words.
No, I would say
to-
consistent with
Yeah.
the economic strategic plan of development as developed by the NEDC and the Board of Selectmen.
Consistent with,
Does that satisfy?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, no, I think that works. That's a good suggestion.
that's an excellent suggestion. Okay, I will wordsmith that,
okay.
and
Do we need to
definitely-
make a motion to make that change to the draft report? Probably.
Go, move.
I'll make motions.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I abstain.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
So, if we, with that change, do we have any additional comments on the draft? And provided that the draft has that change made to it, do we have a motion to accept the draft report, and can it be presented to the Board of Selectmen? We need a motion to accept this and then have it presented to the Board of Selectmen.
I would move that motion.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I abstain on the position that until the new government is formed, we don't even know what we're talking about.
Okay, thank you. So if we're accepting this, we need to present it to the Board of Selectmen and get on their agenda as a presentation. So can you help us coordinate when that's
Absolutely.
appropriate,
Yeah.
knowing their schedule?
Yes, well, I'll do that. I think,
So we can respond in a timely fashion to Lisa and Sean's request?
right. So what I would, I would recommend not Monday's agenda, but the one immediately following that, which will be in early September. And I think that
It won't be Labor Day, so it would,
don't have my,
the 11th is the day before this public hearing.
yeah.
That's the first
It's not
Monday
gonna be-
in September.
That's probably the meeting.
Okay. It's my
Okay.
birthday. They can give it to me
There
as
we
a
go.
birthday gift.
There you go.
Okay, next topic.
Okay. Next item is discussion of EDC recommendations regarding strategic economic development plan. Okay, so this is not something that I think we're gonna get completely finished today, but we need to start a conversation about how we go about making recommendations and becoming a partner with the Board of Selectmen, or the new Board of Selectmen, with the new NEDC on how to develop this in order to implement the changes we're recommending. So,
Thomas, I presume that you have received input from members of the commission. You specifically requested suggestions on how to go about this, so to shape our discussion?
I have not received a whole lot of detailed responses to that.
Have you received any responses?
I believe I have, but they've been more conceptual in nature and not
specific.
Yeah, well, my recollection is, and I tried to find it in my files, and I was unsuccessful, but I believe I did submit a written document on that subject that had a fairly extensive review of steps that we could take that I had hoped would form the basis for discussion at this meeting. And I've lost it. I didn't keep a copy. But I can remember some of the things I said, but I might not remember all of them. But the point of view that I expressed included certainly the idea of first engaging in a a kind of a listening session that would involve seeking views from certain other boards and commissions on the subject of economic development strategies, and certainly included the possibility of a town-wide online study.
Well, I think we can, because I've attended some of the meetings for the new plan of conservation and development that they're working on. There's another meeting, I'm gonna completely blank out on when they have a meeting. They did take a lot of input from boards, commissions, town people, not just about what they envision for Simsbury in terms of open space and stuff like that, what they wanted to see more of here in town. So I think getting some of that data from the planning commission would be helpful in us, because they've already gone through the effort of getting a lot of input, and maybe we can use some of that to help us develop the strategic plan of development, because it was pretty comprehensive. They did telephone surveys, there was an online survey. We as commissioners got the survey sent to us as well. I think that my point of view would be, I think having a meeting with the chamber and with Main Street would be important as well, to understand what kind of phone calls they're getting for needs here in town, what kind of businesses are trying to locate here, and what we need more of, because it might not be restaurants, it could be service industries, it could,
But basically, and that definitely would include the chamber, would include Main Street, would include Planning Commission, would include all kinds of different input, some of which might already be available, but it was only suggested that this accumulation of views would be a logical and necessary first step before a plan is developed. Backing up one step, we couldn't even begin to do that until we had a resource called project director, or directors, to begin the process. And if we haven't identified human resources to actually do this work, no work will get done. And so I would suggest to this commission that the first thing that this commission should do, if it wants to launch the process, and I don't even know if we want to launch the process, we just want to put together a framework for the process and submit it. I don't know which we're doing. We could do both, but maybe given the fact that we don't have resources, we should say the only thing we want to do now is agree on a framework for getting this project done and submit it to the new Board of Selectmen. I don't know, Kristen, could you guide us on that?
Well, seeing as though our commission really only exists until December 1st, correct? So we have 3 more meetings. Our September meeting is going to be discussing the revisions you may or may not want to make to your recommendations for Deepwater Wind project, and then any other agenda items that come up. From a time standpoint, I don't think there's enough time. I think that at this point I don't think it's, in my opinion, I don't think it's necessary to have a project director or a subcommittee, because we don't know what we're gonna look like on December 1st, okay? We don't know what the Board of Selectmen are gonna look like on December 1st. And we don't know if, in conjunction with the new town manager, what type of mission statement or plan the CEO of our town is gonna have for the town. I think that gathering some of the data, requesting the data behind the new POCD regarding economic development would be helpful. I think having conversations with Main Street and the chamber would be helpful ahead of time. But in my opinion, I think only getting that information so we're not behind the 8 ball when this commission gets reformed. My concern would be, we could all not be here on December 1st. It could be a whole new board of people, because it's going to be an appointed board, as it is, always is, but we don't know how that makeup's going to be. So to start something that can't be finished in the next 3 months, I think is a struggle. That's my opinion. I understand we need to start it, okay, but I don't think we can get to the finish line in a short period of time, knowing when this commission stops.
Well, we have one document here that we can submit to help the town move along, and that's the one we just
Right,
approved.
which we're gonna present to the Board of
So
Selectmen.
maybe, and I don't know if this requires a motion or not, but maybe we should just decide that we will provide a second document that simply outlines a plan of action. Not that we're gonna do any of it, but outline a plan of action for the preparation of the strategic plan and a timetable.
Well,
Can I make a suggestion?
Please.
You all will be in front of the Board of Selectmen if all goes as planned to present this document on September 11th, which is all 3 days before the meeting following that. But that might be an opportunity to talk to the Board of Selectmen about what remaining work
they'd like us to see,
they'd like to see for the balance of the
right,
of the term.
because I wouldn't want to,
I mean, for you all to do a lot of work that
That isn't mandated.
I just think that may be a way of
well,
making sure that whatever happens next is consistent with, at least with the current Board of Selectmen.
well, I agree, I mean, once this, letter is sent to the Board of Selectmen and they've had time to review it and we present it, I think a logical next question is, now that you have this document, what do you want next?
It sounds good to me.
And our suggestion would be coming up with a strategic economic development plan, but we don't know what you want. Maybe they need more from this document, more clarification or more work in a particular area, and to tie up our time if they've got another mandate that they have for us.
That's a great approach. Why don't we do that?
Okay.
There's a lot of head nods over here.
I agree, I agree.
I just think that's, we're trying to build a partnership with the Board of Selectmen, and I really think that that's the way to continue that, building that bridge. So I think, if we do the presentation, I certainly, Tom, I would hope that you're gonna be there. Are you in town on the 11th of September?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll be
So you can bring
working.
my birthday cake? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. So, we can plan to
Sure.
present this on behalf of the commission. Is everybody comfortable with that?
Yep.
Plan?
Great.
Okay, is there any older new
Yeah.
business?
Nope.
No? Okay, do you have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks for all,
I
oh,
will
God, I
take a
forgot.
look for that document, my apologies.
Buy your tickets for Taste of Simsbury.
8:20, you can get going on your,
I can go get physical therapy.
What is it? Taste of Simsbury.
8:31.
8:30.
Yep, I've got my 4 tickets. I'm good to go.
All right, so you'll let me know if there's any real issues. I can't see that.
Yes, I think we will.
I just saw, it's funny you say that, I just saw a demo of a prototype of a device specifically to help people stand up. For people who've had surgeries, and it was not for walking, not for moving, just to
getting them up.
get you from a seated to a standing position. I just saw a demo yesterday.
Wow.